On July 19th, 1977, the world teacher, the Christ Maitreya, head of the spiritual hierarchy, emerged from his ancient retreat and is now in the modern world. With his disciples, the masters of the wisdom, he will inaugurate the new age of synthesis and brotherhood.
Good morning and welcome to our World Teacher Programme on Wellington's Access Radio 106.1 FM, presented by Teresa and David on behalf of Share International New Zealand.
The title of our programme today is The Emergence and The Media. In the June 1990 issue of Share International magazine, Benjamin Creme reported on Maitreya's historic conference, noting that Maitreya called it an unqualified success. Mr. Creme begins by saying,
Readers who have followed the emergence of Maitreya will know that over the last 2 years Maitreya has made himself known to a very large group of distinguished people in many countries. These include representatives of governments, diplomats, members of parliament, religious leaders, various members of royal houses, and a large group of well-established journalists. They have all met him in person, spent time with him, and through him have received great spiritual experiences.
Over the weekend of the 21st and 22nd of April 1990, they were invited to attend a conference at which Maitreya presided. Some 200 of these dignitaries were able to accept Maitreya's invitation over the 2 days. Among the guests were an ambassador and other diplomats, MPs, religious representatives, including a bishop, a king and other lesser royals, professors, scientists, industrialists, and about 40 journalists.
Major print and broadcast media from around the world were invited to attend as observers only. In the event, only about 30, mainly British, newspaper journalists accepted this unique opportunity to see Maitreya at first hand. Some of them had been seeking an interview with him for a long time.
Several times during the 2 days, Maitreya appeared and disappeared, showing his control over matter, time and space. He spoke about his presence as a representative of humanity and of the spiritual hierarchy, as the leader of his group of masters, as the instigator, through his energies, of a transformation in human affairs already visible to all. He spoke broadly of his mission and gave an inkling of the nature of his teaching and work in the years ahead.
He outlined his immediate plans to emerge at the earliest possible date, plans which involved the active cooperation of the invited guests. He invited those present to speak about their experiences gained through him, and many gladly accepted this opportunity to speak openly on these matters for the first time. During several intervals for refreshments, the observing media were able to mingle and talk with the guests. In this way, valuable contacts were made and a degree of trust established.
According to my master, it was obvious to the watching hierarchy that both groups found the conference enthralling and uplifting, and it was considered by Maitreya to be an unqualified success.
My master has said that one of the main purposes of the conference was to enable the invited guests to meet each other for the first time, to share experiences and so realize that while they have had the extraordinary privilege of knowing and experiencing Maitreya, they are not alone but part of a large international group of distinguished, eminent people who have had similar experiences.
This international network can now, with confidence, contact each other and speak and write openly about Maitreya and their knowledge of him. Until now, these distinguished people have been held in reserve so that their voices would not be lost in the babble of world news by piecemeal utterance. From now on, and they were encouraged to do this, they are free to speak openly about Maitreya's presence and teachings. In this way, more or less simultaneously, this knowledge can now be disseminated around the world.
When these eminent and influential people speak, it is expected that the masses will believe and set up a worldwide demand for sight and sound of Maitreya, thus galvanizing the response of major media everywhere. Then Maitreya will call another open conference, where he can appear before the media as an established world figure. This, it is expected, will lead quickly to the day of declaration.
The events of May 1982 were an attempt by hierarchy to take advantage of the great media and public interest in the story resulting from our advertising campaign of April 1982 and the large amount of media coverage which I had received in 1980 to 82. It almost succeeded, but not quite.
As for the observing journalists, it was for them an opportunity to see and hear Maitreya directly for the first time, to realize that he does indeed exist and is not a figment of my imagination. They were enabled to talk with other journalists who, from their own experience, took this phenomenon very seriously indeed, and they recognized that Maitreya has the respect and reverence of a large group of eminently intelligent, influential people not easily taken in.
The experience for them must have been salutary indeed. They were not asked to write about the conference. That was left to their own discretion. It may well be that they will do so when news of Maitreya emanates from some of the guests.
How soon the next press conference takes place will depend on the actions of those who attended in April, as well as the response of the media and the public at large to their information. No doubt the different groups will present it in different ways, according to their background, profession and opportunity. I understand that a group of journalists from the Far East are already seeking ways to make it known.
My master has also indicated that we may expect to see certain other extraordinary events, which will highlight, if that were necessary, that we are indeed experiencing a unique moment in history.
Our next article was published a few months later in the September 1990 issue of Share International magazine. It was written by Peter Liefheber, who was a veteran journalist with Holland's largest daily newspaper. At the end of 1999, he stepped down as Share International's co-chief editor with Benjamin Creme, a post he has held since the magazine's inception in 1982. His editorial is called The Media Mystery and begins,
In April, shortly after Maitreya's conference in London, I received a phone call. The woman at the other end had a question, she said, whereupon she proceeded to regale me with an extensive explanation of the universe, an explanation in which no sign of a question could be detected.
Briefly, what it all boiled down to was this. Once again we had been taken for a ride by Benjamin Creme. Because, she told me, the media does not operate in the way that Creme had outlined. This is really the way it works. A chief editor sends a journalist somewhere on an assignment. The journalist then writes a piece or makes a program about it. Then it appears in the paper or on TV.
It stands to reason, you see, because these people are not going to send out their staff for nothing. If dozens of journalists had been at Maitreya's conference, then automatically a lot of publicity would have followed. The fact that this did not happen can logically mean only one thing, she announced, that there never was such a conference.
Since I've been in journalism almost 30 years to the day, I thought I might have some views on this. But the lady did not seem especially keen on the idea. She was well aware, she said, that I worked for a paper. All the more reason why I should be quite ready to admit that she was right. If my boss gave me an assignment, I would report on my impressions and my article would be published, full stop.
I plucked up all my courage, began cautiously to argue with her, and was instantly rewarded by her slamming down the phone, almost frothing with rage. Since, according to journalistic dogma, every caller or letter writer who expresses an opinion represents a far greater number of readers with similar ideas, I'm afraid that the angry woman is not the only one whose notions of how the media functions are based on homespun ideas or on melodramatic TV soaps with a journalistic theme. The reality is somewhat more complicated.
In the first place, chief editors do not always play a part in deciding who goes where. But even when that is the case, the journalist concerned, certainly if he's a seasoned reporter, still has a fair amount of freedom in deciding whether or not he will do the article. If he does produce a piece, there is no guarantee that publication will follow, because that depends on all sorts of commonplace and variable factors, such as the available print space, other news coverage, the status of the journalist himself and that of the department in which he works, the topicality and popularity rating of the subject, etc., etc.
Throughout the many vicissitudes of a journalist's life, one thing, almost by definition, is certain. The supply of articles always exceeds print space available. Apart from the lucky ones who are slaves to their own columns, others must enter the space war, column space, which is often a fight over millimetres.
So far, I have spoken of run-of-the-mill, everyday constraints on the publication of articles. The matter becomes more complicated still where the subject of coverage is politics or some other sensitive issue. In such areas, journalists, more often than the general public might imagine, are subject to restrictive regulations or, particularly in the West, themselves practice a semi-voluntary form of self-censorship.
For example, in most nations, particularly in Britain, with its closed circle of the old boy network, the whole issue of state security is handled with kid gloves by the media. Only recently I read that the BBC, for instance, has left rows and rows of films to gather dust on storeroom shelves. For reasons of state security, they have never been broadcast.
As for myself, I've been fairly lucky in my years as a journalist in the battle for precious column inches. Only a few times have my articles not made it to the finishing line. In the last 10 years, only 3 of my pieces came to an unfortunate end. The first time was because the person I had interviewed used harsh language offensive to the newspaper's management, a possibility the angry lady appeared not to be aware of. The second time was in connection with an article about a lecture by Krishnamurti, the last public meeting he would hold in Saanen in Switzerland. The third concerned the esoteric insights and views of the Peruvian Indians.
The last 2 cases are particularly relevant, not only because of their subjects, but also because of the manner in which both were handled. The Western media feels rather uncomfortable with anything even remotely connected with sects, unless, of course, a shocking scandal involving sex or money can be pinned on them.
But non-sensational articles about non-Christian faiths or philosophies tend to fall into a vacuum. The responsible editors are generally afraid of getting their fingers burnt, cannot easily gauge the reaction of both their superiors and readers, and elect, therefore, to consign all such vague stories to the largest file in any newspaper, the waste paper bin.
The way in which this happens is often quite revealing. Krishnamurti and the Peruvian Indians' esoteric philosophy met the same fate. Both articles were quietly moved to an editorial department other than where I had first submitted them, and subsequently ended up on a slow-moving waiting list, where they were strategically preordained to become the victims of creeping old age. After a month or so, the staff involved could claim, breathing a secret sigh of relief, that those weird articles were old and happily could be allowed to disappear.
No one said explicitly that they would just not do, or that there was no place for them. No one needed to make any decisions. No unpleasant arguments, please. Just a nice, neat solution.
This subtle interplay of unspoken codes makes, in practice, for a publishing priority list in which reports on the World Cup, pregnant princesses, sex and drug scandals, crime and political conflicts, in more or less that order, always hit the jackpot. Topics which, on the other hand, do not fit in with prevailing prejudices and opinions are automatically dumped at the other end of the spectrum.
No journalist, no chief editor even, would then dare to push through such a story off his own bat. In journalism, as elsewhere, the truth is that a wrong decision is bad for your reputation, and that it is safer to put off than to be put out.
I really would have liked to explain all this to the angry lady, but she had already hung up.
You're listening to the World Teacher Program on Wellington's Access Radio 106.1 FM. Here's another article by Peter Liefheber, published in the April 1984 issue of Share International magazine. It's titled An Open Letter to the Media, and begins,
Dear colleagues, for over 20 years I have been in our profession, in my case on daily and weekly newspapers. Over the years there is little ground I have not covered. I have written about murders and court cases, political debates and football matches, about the arts and about race riots, and I have seen, as you have, the whole motley crowd of humanity pass before me on the media merry-go-round. Politicians and burglars, inventors of the perpetuum mobile and of a cure for cancer, actors and advocates of a strict diet of boiled banana skins.
Almost inevitably, I am stating the obvious, one acquires a somewhat cynical view of our society. We have perhaps seen and experienced too much not to have acquired the habit of caution. Too many people with suspect motives try to get into print, or try hard to stay out of it. In particular, my many years as a political editor on the largest daily newspaper in Holland cured me of any lingering trace of naivety. I'm afraid I have few illusions left about the world we live in.
So, on hearing that a certain Mr. Benjamin Creme, living in London, was claiming that Maitreya the Christ was preparing to come and show mankind the way to peace, my reaction was inevitable. Another Messiah, the umpteenth. But nonsense often makes attractive copy, and so I decided 5 years ago to attend one of Benjamin Creme's lectures, and afterwards to interview him and to sound him out.
Some months later, when Creme was on a brief tour of the Netherlands and Belgium, I decided to investigate a little more fully what made this man tick. Obviously, there were many possibilities: financial gain, mental instability, self-deception, desire for publicity, the wish to recruit devoted, sheep-like followers, religious mania, etc. Yet, in the course of various contacts with him, I found myself forced to discard them all, one by one.
The possibility I discarded last was that of self-deception. Creme maintains that he receives his information telepathically from a master of wisdom, one of the disciples of the Christ, or world teacher as he prefers to call him. Not exactly the kind of information that can be easily verified.
I did, however, have a reason, in spite of my deeply ingrained and persistent doubts, in helping Creme to make known his views. His very explicit economic and political ideas about the necessity to create a new world, one in which hunger no longer kills a child every 2 seconds.
Apart from my reservations about his spiritual ideas, I had no trouble at all in agreeing with him that the global community, with all its present selfishness, narrow nationalism and military expansionist drive, is heading straight towards a catastrophe compared to which the Second World War was child's play.
His solution, the acceptance and implementation of the principle of sharing, translated into practical terms, seemed and still seems right to me. This is why I decided to work with him in, among other areas, the publication of a monthly magazine.
Only after working with Creme for over 3 years, during which time I took every opportunity to remind him that his prophecy of the Christ's appearance on the centre of the world stage remained an unproven hypothesis, did I eventually accept the possibility I had initially thought least likely, one which was not even included in my original list, that Creme is right. You will not need much imagination to realize how far I had travelled to come to reach this conclusion, let alone to stick my neck out for it.
It's not possible to convey to you in a short letter what brought me to this point. Even if I could, it would not mean much to you. Besides, I do not seek to give an analysis of my views and assumptions, but prefer to touch on a journalistic phenomenon. Newspapers, radio and television stations in a great many countries have assumed, without actually investigating, that Creme cannot possibly be right. That would be a correct reaction if indeed his story is based on nothing. But it would be a most unfortunate one if his extraordinary story is true.
Permit me to refresh your memories by summarizing briefly some of Creme's claims.
Spiritual teachers of antiquity have always foretold their return or the advent of further teachers. Christians await the Christ. Muslims expect the Imam Mahdi. Buddhists look for the coming of Maitreya Buddha. The Jews for the Messiah, and the Hindus for a new Krishna. These are all names for one and the same individual, Maitreya, the world teacher.
Maitreya and other masters of the wisdom do not reside in some vague, far-off heaven, but in the remote places of the world, from where they guide human evolution.
Periodically, one or more of these masters or their closest disciples, Hermes, Hercules, Rama, Mithra, Krishna, Shankaracharya, the Buddha, the Christ, Mohammed, emerge cyclically, bringing humanity new teachings and guidance. Teachings which often, from being handed down by word of mouth, have been misinterpreted and have given rise to some of the strangest religious dogmas.
The present, in every respect a turbulent period, when renewal, change and rigid conservatism are in constant confrontation, is one of those cyclic times when a new teacher of mankind is due to appear, and indeed has come.
In this case, it is Maitreya himself, the master of all the masters, who left his age-old retreat in the Himalayas to come to London in 1977.
In London he resides within the Pakistani Indian immigrant community, his true identity known only to a small number of that group.
It is his intention, at the earliest opportunity, to come before the world, to make an appeal to all mankind and so convince us of his presence and his mission. This he will do on the day of declaration in a worldwide radio and television broadcast. He will give incontrovertible proof of his status in a most unusual way, through telepathic rapport with all humanity simultaneously.
When Creme announced 2 years ago that this world teacher was in London, he invited us, the media, to go and look for the Christ in a specified area of London. According to Creme, Maitreya could have been found without too much difficulty. You may ask, why do it in this manner? Why could the man himself not come forward? Why would Creme not give a definite address where Maitreya could be found?
Some further questions might provide the answer. Would someone who came forward out of the blue and announced that he was the Christ be believed? And what would the reaction of the press be if Creme introduced him? At a guess, it would probably be as follows. Here is this fellow who for years has been telling an eccentric story about a new Messiah, and now, in order to prove it, he introduces some character who is prepared to play along with this fantasy. The result would be too transparent a conspiracy
You may wonder why I have not taken up the search for the Christ myself. Unfortunately, my association with Creme would again stack the cards more heavily against convincing the public. How different it would be if independent media found this person of whom Creme speaks. This would also be in line with an apparently immutable law. Man has free will and must therefore invite the Christ, in this case by means of the media as representatives of the public, to reveal his identity and his proposals to humankind. Hence Creme's appeal to the media in 1982 to initiate their own investigations.
There was almost no response to this invitation, and today, 2 years on, the situation in the main has changed little, although the passing of time has allowed Maitreya to make it somewhat easier for the press to find him.
What then is the aim of this letter? I would like some of you, just for a while, to put aside your preconceived concepts of what life is all about. I would like you, just for a while, to employ the highest form of scepticism of your own cherished views on what can and cannot be true. I would ask you to employ the best journalistic tool available, dogged investigation. I would ask you to take a few days or weeks to verify what can only be an elaborate hoax or the most important event of our time. In either case, it would make a good story.
And that's our program for today. If you have any questions or would like to know more about the world teacher, Maitreya, and the Masters of Wisdom, please visit the website share-international.org, where you will find more information on the various aspects of the emergence.
To inquire about Share International magazine subscriptions, books by Benjamin Creme, or our monthly free of charge newsletter, the number is 04 234 1133, or write to P.O. Box 9576 Wellington.
Thank you for listening to us on Wellington's Access Radio 106.1 FM. And please tune in to our next World Teacher programme on Saturday the 12th of April at the usual time of 10 a.m.
You can listen again to this programme and previous ones by visiting our website at shared-international-nz.info and click on the radio tab.